Welcome back to another video, and we're making a vase today. We're starting right off with wedging. This type of wedging is called spiral wedging. I'm pulling up a little bit of clay in between my hands and pushing it down into itself while twisting my wrist. This twisting motion creates that spiral wedge. Spiral wedging is specifically useful when wedging more than about 5 pounds of clay. The reason it's more useful is because you're only grabbing a section of the clay and folding it in, rather than being forced to grab the entire sub of clay and fold it in. I have to take a break and add water to the table, because this table is designed to take moisture out of the clay. My clay is perfectly saturated right now, so I'm adding water to prevent it from taking more water out of my clay. With the table being more saturated, I can continue spiral wedging. Another thing to note about spiral wedging is it makes the clay completely homogeneous. This is good because if you have a certain section of the clay that's too wet and a certain section of the clay that's too dry, it's not going to throw on the wheel well. After slicing the 2.5 pounds of clay that I need, I can move on to ram's head wedging. Anything less than about 3 pounds of clay, I'll use ram's head wedging, and anything greater, I'll use spiral wedging. Look at that, we made it to the wheel, and plop. I'm pushing the clay into the vat while rotating my wrist. This ensures a good seal, because if you don't have a good seal and water gets underneath, the clay will just slide off. Before you center, you need to get the clay wet and your hands, because if there's any friction between your hands and the clay, it's going to make the centering process more difficult. Centering is the process of making sure that the clay spins without any movement. I find that the best way to center is by coning the clay up and down. You will cone for 2 reasons. The first reason is it's essentially wedging the clay but on the bat. It gets any air bubbles out and it makes the clay homogeneous. The second reason you would want the cone is because it slowly brings the clay more and more into the center of the bat. I typically cone about 4 to 5 times. More often than not, I'll cone by feel. If the clay is too hard, it's just more difficult to throw the walls, and if it's too soft, it won't hold its shape. Once I'm done coning up and down until I'm satisfied, I'll take all of my weight and push into the center of the clay, ensuring that it's as centered as it can be. Now that the clay is done being centered, I'll start opening it. Opening is really the first step in any bowl or vase or pot that you make. I'll take my left hand and brace the clay to make sure that it doesn't wobble, while I'll take my right hand and push into the center of the clay. Once my fingers are down enough into the clay, I'll start pulling towards myself, and this forces the clay out. I use this needle tool to make sure that the bottom isn't too thick or too thin. If it's too thick, the vase is going to be really heavy and it can even crack when it's in the kiln. Once I'm happy with the thickness, I'll take my 2 thumbs and push the bottom with medium pressure. You want to push the bottom because it compresses the clay, and when the clay is compressed and more dense, it's going to be stronger and it'll handle the firing better. Because of the opening process, it pushes the clay out and makes a donut shape. The donut shape is not where you want to be for pulling and getting height out of the vase, because it's going to tear more easily. So in order to combat this, you start with doming, and doming is essentially evenly pushing this entire wall into a smooth, uniform cylinder. Now that I have the smooth wall, I can start pulling. I'll take my right hand with the sponge and indent the outside of the clay while my left hand supports the inside. With my hands in this position, I just pull straight up, and that forces the thicker top half to become thinner like the bottom half. This is where you're going to get most of the height. Clay is extremely sensitive, and the more you pull, the weaker it gets. So that's one thing I struggle with. It takes me about 5 to 6 pulls to get the height, when it should take me around 2 to 3. As you pull, the clay wants to expand outwards, so I'll take my hand and collar the clay to make sure that it stays in a nice vertical cylinder. I'm happy with the height now, so I'm going to start shaping. Shaping and pulling are essentially the same thing, except with shaping, you're just going to pull less clay and you're going to pull it into whatever direction you want to start refining the shape of the pot. I decided to bring the bottom outwards so it turns into like a V. And then once I got to the top third, I just pulled straight up because I know I want to collar it in to create an inward slope for the neck. Because I'm collaring the neck in a little bit more, the very top half becomes unstable. The best way to combat this is you just account for it because it's going to happen, and you use a needle tool to cut off that top little, I would say, centimeter. Compression is a really consistent theme in pottery, so for this I want to compress the top rim. It again just makes it so that it's less likely to chip and less likely to crack in the kiln. I'm happy with the shape now, so I want to start cleaning up the vase. I'll do this by taking a rubber rib tool or a metal rib tool or even a sponge to remove that muddy slip from the outside and inside of the pot. It's really important to remove the slip because it's going to dry faster and it's also going to dry more smooth. Finally, I'll use a wooden knife tool to cut off the excess clay at the bottom and refine the shape even more. It's been about a day and the clay's dried to leather hard. Leather hard is when the clay isn't so wet that it won't hold its shape, but it's not so dry that it becomes a powder. To start the trimming process, I'll first have to center the pot in the middle of the vat. The best way to do this is by tap centering. I'll wait for the pot to come close to my hand as it goes around, and as soon as I feel that it's about to come close to my hand, I'll tap it back into the center. I'll add 3 pieces of clay equidistant around the pot, and this holds it in place while I'm centering. I'll spin the pot up and take my left hand and push firmly. With this, I'll use my right hand with the trimming tool to shave off the outside of the pot. Again, it's important to stay still because the more still you are, the more round the base is going to be. As I continue trimming, I'll add more detail and make sure that the pot's smooth and round, and I'll even take out clay from the bottom inside to make it thinner and lighter. There it is, me signing my initial signifying the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe. It helps me out and I have a lot of cool videos coming out. Thank you.